Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. The Maha Vikas Aghadi government, which is the ruling party of Maharashtra, is an alliance between the Shiv Sena, the NCP, and the Congress party. These three parties, which have historically been rivals, but together they came to power in the state in November 2019. And since then, their alliance has been more or less stable. But earlier this week, it faced its first major crisis. A crisis which has now turned so big that it threatens to end the alliance altogether. Now, this happened after Shiv Sena leader Eknath Shinde revolted against his party and on Monday night took around 30 MLAs with him to a hotel in Surat.
Now, cracks have emerged within the Shiv Sena and the Maha Vikas Aghadi. We have senior Shiv Sena leader and cabinet minister in the Maharashtra government with several other MLAs in a hotel in Gujarat.
Shinde has now been sacked as the Sena legislative party leader. This is the big update coming in after Shiv Sena, of course, very upset with the fact that Eknath Shinde has taken a full delegation of leaders away from Maharashtra, huddled up in a camp.
BJP, of course, is mulling a strategy as to what happens next. And what we are picking up from our sources is that it's a strategy to try and oust the Aghadi Sarkar. In fact,
over these past few days, more and more MLAs have joined Shinde's camp. And it looks like the unlikely alliance, that is the Maha Vikas Aghadi government, is about to collapse. In this episode, we take an in-depth look at how the crisis started, what it says about the Shiv Sena, and the lessons it needs to learn going forward. And for this, we speak to Indian Express's Shubhangi Khapre, who reports on Maharashtra politics for the paper. And she begins by telling us about the person at the center of this crisis, Eknath Shinde.
Eknath Shinde, 58 years old. He's one of the firebrand leaders of Shiv Sena. He's at the moment cabinet minister holding the portfolio of urban development ministry. He's risen from grassroots as a Shiv Sena Shakha Pramukh. And he's been amongst those loyal Shiv Senics who was groomed during the Bal Thackeray Shiv Sena, which was extremely aggressive, a street smart, and known for, taking on street agitations and fights, and very committed to social work in those days, basically. So he's come from that kind of Sena of the 1960s, 70s, 80s.
And Shinde for a while has been the number 2 in command in Shiv Sena and is one of the most experienced and loyal in the party. Shubhangi says he's one of those leaders who actually goes out and works in the field and is not the kind who's just happy sitting in an air-conditioned office. Plus, he has been Shiv Sena's face in the Thane district.
Thane district is very significant for Sena because that's where they got the first electoral break in the 60s, 70s. And his mentor was Anand Dikhe, another fiery leader, basically, and whom even Bal Thackeray respected a lot because that was a kind of politics. I can say a group of boys who were mentored by Anand Dikhe with Bal Thackeray as the leader. They were totally committed to the organization and they did a lot of sacrifices, personal sacrifices, and really worked very hard, took to the field work and actually went house to campaign for the party and also fought on the streets for the rights of Shiv Sena, for the common people. And that's how they made inroads. At the same time, they also very committed to Hindutva. And that's where they also became a force to reckon whenever there were riots, Hindu versus Muslims. This was a group, Anand Dighe's group of boys, in which Eknath Shinde was a very prominent person, prominent young leader that time, who was absolutely fearless. And that's how they earned their identity, dignity, and also the assertiveness amongst the local people in the masses.
And now this loyal, experienced, and hardworking leader of the party has revolted and has taken Shiv Sena's MLAs with him. And turns out the party leadership, including Uddhav Thackeray, had no idea that this was going to happen. When Shinde took some 30 MLAs with him to Surat, Shubhangi says the party was caught napping.
Absolutely caught napping, absolutely clueless of what was happening under their nose. Because on 21st, when this happened, it was a day when the State Legislative Council polling was going on in Vidhan Bhavan. And all the senior leaders, right from Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray was present. That was a day when all political parties, all top leaders of state leaders were present in Vidhan Bhavan, and the polling was going on. Eknath Shinde himself was there, and all those who rebelled were also present there. And after casting the vote, after exercising the franchise, these people in groups together, they left from the premises, in cars. And it is amazing. I mean, it also reflects the lack of intelligence input, because you have a chief minister from your party who is Uddhav Thackeray, who's a leader of the Shiv Sena, and he's absolutely clueless like what was happening in his party. And none of the senior leaders who were also present amidst them had absolutely no idea what was going on, because these people in large numbers, they drove away from Mumbai, they crossed the borders of Maharashtra to reach Surat. And after the elections, when the results were declared, the results were delayed by 2 hours because of some internal kind of the NCP and the BJP making charges and questioning each other's votes. But when the actual results came after 8:30, suddenly the Shiv Sena realized that there has been some cross-voting from the party.
Cross-voting means that people within the Maha Vikas Aghadi government had voted for the BJP in the Legislative Council elections. This is when the Shiv Sena leadership decided to get in touch with the members of the party. But when they did, it turned out that a lot of them were unreachable. But until this point, they had no idea that something was wrong. But Shubhangi points out that it's not just Shiv Sena. Even the NCP and the Congress had no clue. And this is significant because the state home ministry is under NCP, and yet they did not know that 30 MLAs were leaving the state.
Because each one of them, they have an escort, they have a bodyguard. And so when they cross this certain state border, they have to report it to the control rooms to inform them that, about their movement. And each one of them was an elected member who had a bodyguard, who had an escort. So the movements are always reported to the police control room. And yet nobody kind of doubted like how they went through without reporting, or, how such a large number of people could cross Maharashtra borders without police knowing it or without the intelligence department knowing it. That is also very shocking, basically.
But now the question is, why did Shinde do this? Why did he feel the need to revolt? Turns out there are multiple reasons for this. And one of them is that he was not getting a free run in managing his portfolio as the state urban development minister, and that the Thackeray family would constantly interfere in his affairs.
The Thackeray family absolutely kind of, interfered in his functioning. What I'm told is at Matoshri, his files were called, and then there was this another MMRDA which comes under his department. So I'm told Thackeray's son Aditya Thackeray, who's also cabinet minister, would often go there and take charge of matters related to urban development department. And that was not something which happens generally when you have a senior cabinet minister, of whether it's of Shiv Sena or any party. No minister would like interference to this extent. It's very humiliating. And that he had objected to several times, but there was no mechanism to address this kind of problems.
So interference by the Thackeray's was one problem. But she says the other thing that triggered his revolt was an argument he had with Shiv Sena's senior leader and MP Sanjay Raut. This argument had been about the upcoming council election polls. Shinde had said that the party should not support Congress since Congress had not supported them in the Rajya Sabha elections.
And I think there was this heated argument between him and Sanjay Raut. And Sanjay Raut very ruthlessly admonished him in front of others, which he had not liked. And later, I think when Eknath Shinde tried to go and meet Chief Minister in his chamber, he was kept waiting outside. Whereas he saw that his other colleague, Anil Parab, was sitting and kind of having discussions with him, with CM and his son Aditya Thackeray. So he felt very humiliated. He felt very insulted by such things. And this is not the first time that have happened. Recently, I'm told at a party meeting, Eknath Shinde had proposed that the coming Thane Municipal Corporation elections, the Shiv Sena should contest alone. But his idea was shot down by Sanjay Raut, and he said, no, we go in alliance with Congress NCP. Now, I think that freedom which he had enjoyed till now to take decisions in matters related to Thane district also had come under challenge. And I think which he also has started feeling that he's deliberately being undermined and he's being sidelined in the organization on important issues.
And the other thing is that Shinde had been hoping to rise further in the party and be elevated to a higher position. But that had not been happening. Like in 2019, when the alliance came together, he had been hoping that he would become the chief minister.
But even that idea was shot down. I mean, Thakres were always very suspective about him because they always thought if they make him the leader or if they empower him politically, he would become a parallel power center to the Thakres. And that deliberately they tried to keep him under control by giving him a good portfolio, but also ensuring that he was not in top as far as the power politics is concerned.
And it was not just Eknath Shinde. There had been a huge discontent brewing inside the Shiv Sena. In fact, NCP chief Sharad Pawar had given a warning to Uddhav Thackeray a few months ago that he needed to do something about it, otherwise there could be a revolt. But Thackeray did not pay much heed to it. In fact, Thackeray himself had become quite inaccessible, which is something that even the Congress leaders had a problem with. But the other big point is that Shiv Sena and its leaders have never seen NCP and the Congress as their natural allies. Their partnership has always been with the BJP, which is more in sync with their ideology.
Now, the problem is for 3 decades, they have fought against Congress and NCP in constituencies when it comes to electoral politics. And suddenly now they are confronted with this dilemma where they have to be friends in the government. But when they go back to the constituencies, they didn't know how to adjust because the rivals are NCP and Congress. So this kind of confrontation, like you are in government together, but in the constituencies, you have to fight your same allies. And that adjustment was not happening. And the transition was not going to happen so soon. So there was a lot of this unrest and questioning amongst the Shiv Sainik MLAs also, like how do they adjust this kind of coalition when it comes to electoral politics? It's fine in a cabinet where you have just 42 ministers and 1 chief minister. It is easy to adjust. But when you have to go in elections for 288 assemblies, what kind of power share it will be? What kind of seat sharing will be? And these were the questions that were actually agitating the Shiv Sainiks.
Also, older members of the party had been complaining that because of this alliance, Shiv Sena had to change its hard Hindutva image. And she says that these concerns were being voiced in party meetings that were attended by Uddhav Thackeray.
So it was not that Uddhav Thackeray didn't know what were the problems, but I think he could never imagine that a cabinet minister or an elected member of Shiv Sena will rebel. I think he had never imagined this. He could never think about it. At the most, he thought they would express the anger, disappointment, but he or even these political managers around him or his team could never imagine there would ever be a revolt against him within the party.
Now, when Shinde revolted and took some 30 MLAs with him, senior leaders within the Shiv Sena accused the BJP, saying that the party was carrying out Operation Lotus.
See, Operation Lotus is a term coined by BJP to break the elected governments wherever they can across India, across the states. Now, the problem is in Maharashtra, they have been waiting for a long time because in 2019 Assembly and Lok Sabha elections, BJP was in alliance with Shiv Sena. And after Assembly elections, Shiv Sena betrayed BJP. This is a feeling BJP feels. BJP feels that Shiv Sena, instead of having an alliance with them, went with Congress NCP. So there's a strong sense of betrayal. So they were from day one waiting for a right moment to either dislodge the government or in a way break the Shiv Sena. And they couldn't have done unless there was unrest, unless there were in-house problems within the Shiv Sena.
The kind of problems that Shubhangi talked about earlier. And so BJP was waiting patiently to pounce on the right opportunity. And in the meantime, it kept reiterating that this alliance between Shiv Sena, Congress and NCP will not work.
First of all, ideologically, they are not at par with each other. So that was a major hurdle. Even if they subscribed to common minimum agenda, it was very difficult to implement it when it came to politics. It was workable when it came to administration or policy matters. But how does a Shiv Sainik go into his or her constituency and explain a kind of compromise on Hindutva agenda? So that was a dilemma every Shiv Sainik was facing. And this is the aspect which BJP kind of fueled it and tried to exploit in successive local bodies elections or in their campaigns throughout this 2.5 years. They raised these questions like what is Shiv Sena's stand on, say, Veer Savarkar? Or what is Shiv Sena's stand on this Ram Temple movement? What is Shiv Sena's stand? Why is Shiv Sena not going to Ayodhya or going to Ayodhya? And what is Congress's stand on this? So yes, BJP provided them with all the logistics. BJP facilitated everything they needed. But at the same time, BJP also campaigned so hard throughout Maharashtra to create that atmosphere where Shiv Sainik was forced to think about his electoral future, and also that generated into an unrest.
And this is what is behind this crisis within the Shiv Sena. Now, like mentioned earlier, at first some 30 MLAs out of 55 were in Shinde's camp. They were first brought to Gujarat, but were later shifted to Assam, which also has the BJP in power. And slowly we found out that more MLAs were joining Shinde's camp. And while this was happening, Uddhav Thackeray decided to address the state. And in this address, he said that he will submit his resignation letter if they come and ask for it. And that if any MLA wanted him not to continue as the chief minister, then he was ready to take all his belongings from the official residence of the chief minister to Matoshri, his private residence.
जर त्याच्यापैकी एकाही आमदाराने समोर येऊन मला सांगितलं किंवा जर त्यांनी स्टेटमेंट दिलं की उद्धव ठाकरे मुख्यमंत्री पदावरती नकोत, तर मी आत्ता मुख्यमंत्री पदाचा राजीनामा द्यायला तयार आहे आणि ह्याच्यावरती विश्वास नसेल तर आज आपली फेसबुक लाईव्ह झाल्यानंतर आज संध्याकाळपासून मी माझा मुक्काम वर्षावरनं मातोश्रीला हलवत आहे.
He used the broadcast to gain sympathy and also to show that he is being wronged. So he's trying to play the card of a victim. So he's trying to show that, look, I'm here in my tenure as a chief minister. Maharashtra is one of the 5 states which had performed excellent. And, we had to go through very hard times and yet we overcame that. So he's trying to show that, as far as administration is concerned, as far as the role of CM is concerned, I am not to be blamed. I have done my duty and I have done with lot of sincerity. I may be inexperienced, but I put my best. And then secondly, also try to show that it's not as if that I've never ignored the members or I have not heard their concerns. So he's trying to express kind of a clarification coming out from him, which is also very shocking because at that post, you don't come out with clarifications, Either you accept it with dignity that yes, if they have revolted, there must be a reason, right or wrong, fine. If they don't want, I step down because there's no other way. But I think he used this thing to portray that the Thackeray's have not done anything wrong.
In addition to this, she says that he wanted to gauge the reaction of the grassroots workers and whether they would side with him, whether they would root for him. But to his disappointment, that did not happen.
Had this been in the 60s, 70s or 80s, I think there would be thousands and thousands or lakhs of people who would be on the street had it been during Bal Thackeray's regime. But the fact that, yesterday it was a very dismal show. There were hardly, say, 8 to 10,000 at the most people on the street. And I think that also somewhere shows that something is terribly wrong with Shiv Sena as an organization. Because the actual strength of Shiv Sena was the grassroots worker in the 80s and 90s. And if they were not shaken by this kind of revolt, then it shows that Thackeray's are losing out when it comes to the grassroots or when it comes to the ground reality. And that's a serious comment.
She says that what people in general are not liking is that the Thackeray's are promoting their own family members. Like Bal Thackeray was the founder of the party, and he handed his legacy over to Uddhav Thackeray, who has yet to prove himself in the eyes of the people. But at the same time, Uddhav's young son Aditya Thackeray is also the cabinet minister. And that is a problem for many because he has not worked as hard as others in the party to be in this position.
The grassroots worker would feel like, what the hell are we? We have given 30 years for the party and we have not even been made a very small post in the organization. And here you have a parachute leader who's, becoming a minister and who's calling the shots and who's dictating terms to the seniors. I think that even the grassroots workers will not like.
She says that this is something that the Shiv Sena did not keep in mind. And this is what has come back to bite them. Now, talking about the revolt, initially Shinde had 30 MLAs with him. But at the time of this recording on Thursday, a total of 40 MLAs had joined his camp, meaning only 15 MLAs were still standing with Uddhav Thackeray. And the question now is, who will the real Shiv Sena party be? The one with the Thackeray's or the one with Eknath Shinde?
Because right now what happened is elected members have gone, but say unless there's a vertical split in, say, the office bearers or at the Shakha levels, the smallest unit of the Shiv Sena, then the whole thing of acquiring the symbol of bow and arrow will come. But if Eknath Shinde with his elected members just forms a separate groups and claims that yes, I have parted and I want to form a separate party, that will be acceptable technically under the anti-defection law. But the symbol of the Sena will remain with Thackeray's. And only next course of action would be for them to again rebuild the organization. That will be a huge challenge then.
And if this continues, and it is likely that it will, all members of Shiv Sena across Maharashtra will have to take a stand and choose a side, either Thackeray's or Shinde. And now talking about the Maha Vikas Aghadi government, well, they will have to see if they survive or not, with so many MLAs leaving one of their main alliance partners. The halfway mark in the assembly is 144, and right now the alliance seems to be short of 29 to 30 MLAs.
So where are they going to get these numbers? And if you add the smaller parties and the independents, the total strength is 29, of which already I think 8 to 10 are with Eknath Shinde. So there's no way Shiv Sena, Congress and NCP can get this halfway mark, even if they reach out to, say, smaller parties or allies. So the only way for them is, unless that so-called the rebel that has happened, if Eknath Shinde says, fine, I'm going to forgive and I'm returning back to Shiv Sena, only then the government will survive. But that seems almost impossible, because right now, if he has gone to that extreme, I don't think there's a possibility of reconciliation between Uddhav Thackeray and Eknath Shinde. Is absolutely very remote, very remote.
Now, the other thread that has played a role in this crisis is Eknath Shinde's long-time friendship with BJP leader and former Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis. They had been cabinet colleagues in 2014, and that is when they developed a mutual respect for each other.
And probably Fadnavis also could have sensed how badly these people were being treated in the parent organization. And the BJP has exploited this unrest or this dissent within the Shiv Sena and cultivated it very kind of systematically. So at that time in 2014, Shinde was holding a portfolio of Public Works Department. And I think Fadnavis, who came out with this pet project of Mumbai-Nagpur Samruddhi Mahamarg, he entrusted this entire project, it was a huge project, to Eknath Shinde. And he gave him complete freedom, he trusted him, and he also kind of gave him adequate support to ensure everything goes right in that project. And not only that, he publicly several times praised him for the good work he had done in land acquisition and ensuring the project moves smoothly, the amount of hard work he put in. And I think that kind of applause which he received from the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, who belonged to another party, was not there within his own Shiv Sena or not coming from Uddhav Thackeray. And I think that must have been one reason also for the greater bonding between Fadnavis and Shinde. And somewhere he probably saw that his political aspirations or whatever his ideas of, whether it comes to Thane politics or whether it comes to fulfilling his wish of getting greater responsibilities in governance, would be easier to fulfill under Fadnavis's leadership. And I think that the rapport built in over the last 7-8 years.
This is the reason why she says that in the past, BJP has openly offered Shinde to join their party. But when talking about this crisis, the thing to always keep in mind is that the alliance between NCP, Congress and Shiv Sena is unusual, or unnatural as Shinde called it. So at one level, it was only likely that things would go wrong.
And even if we set aside this whole thing of ideology, Hindutva and all that, the problem is there are only 288 seats in Maharashtra Assembly. Even if we take, for example, the Congress, NCP and Shiv Sena, everything had gone right, Shinde had not revolted or anything. The government survived for 5 years. Now, in 2024 elections, what kind of seat sharing they would have gone for? Like even one third, I mean, nobody would have been satisfied with that. Why would Shiv Sena take just, say, 90 seats and contest? Or why would NCP agree for that? So the problem is the people who are in government, who are ministers, they want alliances, they want coalition. But a majority of them who are not ministers, who are not in government, they always feel that they should always know who their political rivals are. And that should be very clear.
And for Shiv Sena, BJP is a natural ally. She says that this is because Hindutva is in the party's DNA. And with the BJP as an alliance partner, they have the advantage to go for a 50-50 seat sharing arrangement. Now, this crisis can teach a lot of lessons, especially to the Shiv Sena. Like one lesson to learn is regarding the role of the chief minister. Shubhangi says that Uddhav Thackeray does not really have the rigor that is required to run the government.
I mean, a chief minister is like a 24/7 job. I mean, it's not a structured kind of thing where you call a meeting in a day and just then, retire. I mean, here you have to be on toes 24/7, and especially when you are leading a state like Maharashtra, which is so complex and so huge. And especially when you have a three-parties coalition, which is more complex, you cannot just say, I'm going to work for 6 hours or 8 hours, that kind of thing. And secondly, it's not his nature. Uddhav Thackeray is he's used to the political management, but certainly not running such complex coalition.
For a role like this, you need someone who can understand such complications, work hard, and keep everything under control. And she says that the other lesson for Thackerays is that in this climate, dynasty politics is not going to work.
Whether it's in center or state. See, all these whiles, Bal Thackeray was the most vocal amongst all the politicians who had always slammed Gandhi Parivar for promoting dynasty. But now when it came to his own party, he promoted his son. Bal Thackeray promoted his son, Uddhav. Now Uddhav is promoting his son, Aditya Thackeray. And that is not going to work in present politics, Today's youth not going to accept one family rule, whether it's at center or state, unless the leader whom you're projecting has done something outstanding, remarkable, and proven himself in politics.
You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.